This video is going to be about air brakes, and we're going to take the information from the Vermont Commercial Drivers Manual, Section 5. If you're going to be driving a vehicle with air brakes and a trailer or a trailer with air brakes, you also need to read Section 6. Now, the Vermont Department of Motor Vehicles did not distinguish between whether or not you're going to be towing a trailer. We all know school buses do not tow a trailer, but you have to read Section 6 anyway. My name is Mike. I'm a Class B CDL instructor. Let's get started. Now, don't forget to stop the video and read through each section as we go through it, and then turn the video back on and listen to what I have to say about that section again. But let's start with the very first paragraphs there on Section 5. Air brakes are an excellent way to stop a vehicle, but they need to be maintained, and they consist of three different parts: your service brake, your park brake, and your emergency brake. Now, your service brake helps stop the vehicle as you apply pressure to the brake pedal. Your park brake applies brakes to hold the vehicle in position when you pull that yellow knob. The emergency brake uses parts of both systems. In the event of emergency or an air system failure, the brakes will automatically come on. Now let's talk about some of the parts to the air brake system. The first and obvious one is the air compressor. This could be two different kinds. It could be an external air compressor, which sits on the front of the engine and driven by a V-belt, which would be cooled by air and has its own oil supply. You need to check that regularly. The other one is an internal air compressor. You can't see it, but it's gear-driven, lubricated by the engine oil, and cooled by the engine coolant. Either way, be sure to check your fluids so that nothing goes wrong with them. The air compressor governor is a unit that allows the compressor to cut out when it reaches 125 psi in the air storage tanks. Conversely, the air compressor will cut in when the governor senses that the air pressure has fallen below 100 psi. Now, there may be multiple air tanks on your vehicle: primary, secondary, auxiliary. It depends on the vehicle. But each tank will have a drain system to it. And it may be a manual system, it may be an automatic system. But there could be water and oil in these systems, oil from the air compressor, let's say, and water from moisture in the air that can damage the braking system. It can freeze in the wintertime and damage the brakes or any number of things. So be sure to drain the air tanks at the end of each day. If it's an automatic system, this will do it for you. Some automatic systems have an electronic heater to prevent things from freezing in the winter as well. But be sure to drain the fluids completely, or drain the air completely out of the tanks to make sure you get any fluid or oil in there out. Your vehicle may also be equipped with an evaporator system using alcohol, so be sure that that's filled every day. This will help take the water out of the system. Air tanks always have a pressure relief valve in emergencies, and that's usually set for about 150 psi. So if something goes wrong and the compressor is still pumping air, the governor fails, your tank won't go over 150 psi before it's released. If this happens, be sure to have the mechanic take a look at it. And the air brake system can also lose air if you use the service brake repeatedly, quickly enough times. It'll drain the air tanks, and maybe the compressor won't be able to keep up with it. If this happens and it falls below 55 psi, then the air brake low pressure warning light will come on. And if it keeps going, then your emergency system brake will come on and the brakes will lock up. Now be sure to read through the sections on 5.1.8 foundation brakes. Read those two paragraphs and understand that the heat from these brakes can cause a lot of damage. It can cause heat cracks along the brake drum or rotor, so those need to be paid attention to, and you'll see more about that later. But I want you to look at this figure in 5.2 of the drum brake system and follow along as you see the cam roller and the brake cam. If you look at that brake cam, it's kind of in the form of an S, and that's what that paragraph is talking about. That's the S cam. It's attached to the cam shaft that runs along to the slack adjuster. You see that kind of at the top of that top right corner of that diagram. Attached to that slack adjuster is a push rod that goes into the brake chamber. The brake chamber is kind of hidden behind the drum. You can see it. And that rod that sticks out is called the push rod. Those are a couple of terms that you'll need to know, is push rod and slack adjuster, and that S cam. Now when that brake chamber is filled with air, it pushes that slack adjuster and rotates that S cam, which separates those brake shoes and presses it against the brake drum. That causes the friction, which stops the bus. It also causes a great deal of heat, and that's what we're talking about. If it's too much heat, it can cause damage to the brake drum and the brake pad. So we'll be talking about those as we go along. Now continue to read through those next two paragraphs, wedge brakes and disc brakes. Wedge brakes is simply a different style than the S-cam. It's a wedge that goes in between the brake pads that separates them and pushes them against the brake drum. But the disc brake is slightly different. That has more of a power screw instead of an S-cam, which squeezes the brakes together against the rotor. Those rotors are also what you need to look for when you're looking for heat cracks. And we'll talk about those more again later. Now let's drop down to 5.1.9 supply pressure gauges. In this image, you'll see two gauges. One is the primary air tank and one is the secondary air tank. These gauges represent how much pressure is actually in the tank. You need to remember that. There's also a possibility that your vehicle may have an application pressure gauge. I do not have that showed in a photo, but that would tell how much pressure you're actually putting on the brakes when you step on the service brake. But take a look at the low air pressure warning in 5.1.11. In each bus, according to federal law, a warning signal must come on at 55 psi or before. Now you'll see that represented at the top of the red arc on those gauges. There's a slash mark. That's 55 psi. And that has to come on before 55 in order for the system to be working properly. So another type of warning device on older vehicles is what's called a wigwag that you see pictured here. That also comes on when the pressure drops below 55 psi. And you'll have to either put that up manually, or when the pressure builds up again, it'll draw it up depending on what type of wigwag system that you have. There's not many of these around, but just be aware that they are out there. Now let's take a look at your book under 5.1.13. Front wheel limiting valves, or sometimes they're a proportion valve. These are applications that are put in your brake line that you can't adjust, you can't do anything about it. But they have to do with managing the amount of pressure you're putting on the brakes to control either during weather conditions or the amount of load that you have, so the distribution of brake power between the front and rear brakes uses the maximum ability. The important thing to remember here is that front wheel braking in all conditions is good. Now let's take a look at the section under spring brakes. All trucks, tractors, and buses have a park brake emergency brake system. These brakes are fully on when there is no air in the system because the brakes are held back by air pressure. There are powerful springs that are in your air canister that hold the brake pads away from the brake drum. When the air is taken out, when air is gone, the spring brakes come on and hold the bus in place. Now, these air brakes, the spring brake system will come on fully when your air pressure drops between 20 and 45 psi. So it's important when you hear that low air brake warning come on at 55 psi to get off the road and find out what the problem is. The other thing is if these spring brakes aren't adjusted properly, then your brakes just won't work right. Now under parking brakes, it talks about that yellow diamond-shaped control knob on the dashboard. When you pull that out, that's when those powerful spring brakes come on. You push it in to release those brakes so that you can move the bus. Now there is a caution here that suggests when those spring brakes are on, you don't step on the service brake. Supposedly it may damage them. Most vehicles are not set up that way. In fact, most buses, you have to step on the service brake before you can release the park brake. Now there's also a thing called a modulating control valve. This is usually just on trailers, and you might see it on the side of your dashboard. It's a box where you can squeeze it and let it go. It adjusts the tension of the brakes that are on the trailer. So it'll help you to slow down and you can control that situation. I understand that there also older buses have this on the dashboard where you can control the spring brakes in that way. I've never seen one. They say they're out there, but you just need to know they are there. Now take a look at dual parking control valves. Just read through that section and be familiar with that paragraph and this chart. Be aware that there are some valves installed in trucks that if you lose all the air in the system, there are certain valves that will allow you to charge the system and release those spring brakes so you can at least get it off the road. There are different types or shaped different ways. Just be familiar with the chart that you're seeing there. Okay, now look under anti-lock braking system, section 5.1.16. To tell if your vehicle is equipped with ABS, you need to check your certification label. Read through that paragraph and you'll see the dates of when they have to be installed. But some ABS systems may have been installed in vehicles before that voluntarily. Just read that paragraph over and check that out. Also, you can tell if you have ABS because there'll be a yellow check light bulb on your dash. You have to make sure that that comes on and goes off. That's a bulb check, and sometimes it's a system check to make sure that the system's working properly. Also, if you really want to look, you can't tell if you have ABS, look under the wheels, behind the wheels, and look for that ABS sensor wire. You can check for that ABS sensor wire coming off from the wheel. Now, ABS does not increase or decrease your normal braking operation, and it does not shorten your stopping distance, but it does help you keep your vehicle under control. So remember those things. Now let's talk about the air system itself, dual air brakes and testing the system. Look at the next page under 5.2. Now, vehicles with a dual air system, you'll find two gauges on the dash, primary and secondary air tanks that we've already mentioned. There are two tanks under the vehicle, primary and secondary. Usually one system, the primary runs the front and the secondary runs the back. Both systems often run a trailer if you're towing a trailer. But the thing to remember is that when the low pressure alarm goes off, it has to go off before 55 psi. That's federally mandated. Now, when the pressure rises, the alarm system will turn off where the manufacturer of the vehicle has set that value, which has to be above 55 psi. So each vehicle will be a little bit different. Just remember, if it drops below 55 psi, you have to get off the highway and have the system checked. Now, under the next section in that column, inspecting the system, first remember to check the compressor drive belt if you have a compressor that is external. And you'll see that on the front of the engine, and there'll be a V-belt that wrapped around it. Check the oil in that system and check the belt to make sure it's tight, not cut or frayed. If it is not external, then it's internal. And you have to remember these terms. If it's internal, it's gear driven, lubricated by engine oil, and cooled by engine coolant. You won't be able to see the compressor, it's inside the engine, but you have to know the difference between the two. Also, the slack adjusters have to be checked. When you're under the hood, you look on the other side of the tire, you'll see the air canister, push rod, and slack adjuster. You have to push on that slack adjuster to make sure it doesn't have more than 1 inch of play in it. Now, in order to do that, you have to chock the wheels, put the bus on level ground, empty the system of air, and then go and check those slack adjusters. If there's any movement on them, it has to be less than 1 inch. One of the most common problems with these brakes is out of adjustment slack adjusters. Most of these adjusters nowadays are all automatic adjustment, but they do still get out of adjustment and need a mechanic to adjust them properly. Move on to that section that says check the brake drums. You have to look at the brake drums and the rotors from time to time to make sure there are no heat cracks on them that are longer than half of the friction area. Now that's important to remember, and your mechanic needs to be notified if you find any. Also look at the pads. The brake shoes themselves must have more than 1/4 inch of liner left on them, and there can't be any grease or sludge on them either. Also check the air hoses, make sure there's no cracks or leaks in them. Okay, now let's talk about testing the system. You want to make sure that the air compressor can pump air into the system starting at 100 psi, and it should shut off at 125 psi. If it doesn't, then you need to get a hold of your mechanic and have them take a look at it. Now let's test the system itself. In order to do that, you want to make sure the system is fully charged. So then turn the engine off and turn the key back to run so that you can still hear alarms come on. You want the electronics on. So the first thing you want to do is release the park brake so the spring brakes are held back. You want to make sure that you don't lose air pressure more than 2 psi. Watch your primary gauge for this. And it can't lose more than 2 psi within 60 seconds. Next, you want to check your service brake. So push down hard on your service brake, hold it down, and you'll see an initial drop in pressure. But now you're looking for a 3 psi or more drop. If there is, then your system's not working right. So now we want to check that low air pressure alarm. So start fanning your brakes by pumping them quickly and releasing air. The alarm should go off before 55 psi. Keep pumping air to release the air, and you should hear the spring brakes come on between 20 and 45 psi. If that happens, that part is good. Now we want to check the air compressor. So now start the engine and let it charge. Just to charge normally. You can't use fast idle or step on the throttle. But the system has to charge between 85 and 100 psi within 45 seconds. If that works fine, then your next test is to drive forward with the brakes on. So to do that, you want to pull the chocks, close the door, put your seatbelt on, and start the engine. With the park brake on, put it in drive and step on the throttle and raise the RPMs to 1500. If the brakes hold, that's good. Do the same thing in reverse. It should hold up to 1500 RPMs. Now you want to put the vehicle in drive, release the park brake, and let it roll forward about 5 miles an hour and step on the brake hard. You want to see if the steering wheel pulls to the left or the right. If it does, that indicates that there's a problem with the brakes on the left or the right. But if it just rolls straight, steering wheel doesn't move, then that test is fine. Now let's talk again about ABS. Look at your section on the next column there. Now, ABS is an anti-lock braking system. The system senses when you push on the brakes hard, and it makes an adjustment to lower the pressure of the braking so that you can still steer around obstacles. You may not be able to stop any faster, but the point is you still have some steering control. So I want you to read through that whole column and make sure you understand all about ABS. Even if you have ABS only on the tractor or only on the trailer or only on one axle, you still have better control than if you didn't have it at all. So read through those paragraphs, make sure you understand them. Probably the important thing is to remember, even without ABS, if ABS fails, you still have normal braking function. Now move over to that next column where it says emergency stopping. Check out those paragraphs that say stab braking and controlled braking. A couple of different techniques there that will help you in certain situations if ABS doesn't work, or even if it does. Read through those paragraphs. It'll give you some tips on how to control your vehicle. Now look at that paragraph called stopping distance. This is a tough one because it brings another element into the formula here of perception, reaction, and braking distance. It brings in a thing called brake lag. Now, brake lag for air brakes is when air takes the time to compress. Hydraulic doesn't compress, it's instant, but air takes time to compress. So that's why they add brake lag into here, and it makes a difference in your reaction in braking distance. So remember this formula. It's perception distance, reaction distance, brake lag, and braking distance. That's an important part to be on the test. And look at brake fading or failure. Brake fading is when the brakes heat up so much that they start to lose their effectiveness. So if you're going down a long hill and you hold the brakes on, then those brakes are going to heat up, and it's going to take more and more pressure for you to push down on the pedal in order to stop. So that's brake fading. And that's why you've been told about different ways to control braking. So pay attention to those two paragraphs, understand what brake fading is before you move on. Now under that section, braking techniques, your braking is really a supplement to the braking effect of the engine. So don't forget to use that when you're going down a hill. Shift down into a lower gear. If you have to use the brakes, a good way to do it is just as it's described in this section. Hold the brakes down for a few seconds, then let off so that they have a chance to cool. Then apply the brakes again to slow down some more, let off, let them cool some more. Read this section through, and it tells you in detail how this is effective. And for that last session, remember, use the parking brake anytime you park your vehicle, except for as it's listed in this paragraph. If your brakes are really wet and it's a freezing cold day, don't use the parking brake until they dry out. Use wheel chocks instead. Or if your wheels are really hot and you stop and apply the parking brake for any period of time so they cool down, that's going to damage the system. Use your wheel chocks instead and let the brakes cool first. So be sure you read through these paragraphs because there's some important stuff in there that you'll need to know on your test. If you have any doubt about anything that we've done in these air brakes, go back and read it over. These elements are important for you to know. So if you have any comments or questions about anything in this section, leave me a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and smack that like button.